After uploading my last video, I noticed that I was incredibly close to 500 videos, and as such I decided to commemorate all of the years I've been doing this and make a video about the top 10 videos that I enjoyed making. Now, there's been a various mix of videos that I've done, some good, some bad, and some that I'm just embarrassed to even think about now. And throughout the time I've been on YouTube, the videos that I've done have drastically changed as my interests waxed and waned. What I had available to use changed, and what I have now is completely different from what I had then. Now, for this list there's two major rules I'm keeping in mind. The first is I have to have edited the videos, and it can't just be raw footage. Not so much that there's no raw footage in it whatsoever, but in that I must have actually had an active part in doing it. And whilst this may remove some of my favourite videos that were enjoyable to do, such as the Soul Level 75 Flank Shield vs Win, and some of the streams highlights that I have, I want to focus on the ones that I have actually edited as opposed to things that just amusingly happened in the game. And the other major rule is it's gauged on the enjoyment out of me making the video and the overall result, as opposed to just one or the other. There are other videos which I think were better videos overall that had worse editing, but these were the ones that, when I actually sat down to do them, were the ones I enjoyed doing the most. And without further ado, let us get started. Number 10. At number 10 we have Dark Souls PvP MLG Pro Parries. This was a very unexpected video to come up that occurred thanks to a bit of latency between me and Mr. Yokel when we were having some friendly duels, and it led to a relatively amusing case of flying mid-air drop-down parries. So, with this in mind, after a few clips of that managed to get recorded, surprisingly it happened more than once, so we cobbled together something very quickly, which I then went to town with a bit of overtop editing and adding in a few sound effects to make it a little bit more interesting, and it ended up leading to a relatively pointless video that could have really been summarized in, as Mr. Yokel did, a brief 30-second video of the fight with the sudden teleportation. But I enjoyed editing it, and the ending at the end was a little throwaway inside joke towards a certain matter with regards to aliens and Richie Boy. So, that was that. Number 9. Number 9 is also a video that was never expected to have been made. Beginning with us playing through a cooperative playthrough of Borderlands, the pre-sequel, and we will eventually get around to Borderlands 2, in which we'll probably crash cars even more, because, yeah, it turns out none of us can drive at all in Borderlands, and what went from a single instance of us crashing the car immediately on unlocking them, it ended up turning into a compilation of all of the crashes that we experienced in the game. And then, because I was looking for suitable music to go with it, I stumbled across an old soundtrack from a game that I played when I was younger, Crash Test Dummies, and I decided it's fitting, and with that I decided to just try and sync it up with the music as best as possible, and that led to a lot more editing than as initially expected, and whilst it took longer than I wanted to spend on the video, because it's been so long since I've done anything along those lines, it ended up, in my opinion, being quite good overall. Number 8. Number 8 is the oldest and shortest video on this list, being an AMV from back when I did that, which was a long time ago. This was the final one that I actually finished and uploaded, and it was personally the best work I've done with an AMV. And following up from it, I just couldn't get back into doing it, so I left them be, and yeah, this was the last one I ever did. Number 7. From the shortest video to the longest. Number 7 is the Knight Artorias vs Artorias of the Abyss PvP video, where myself and Happy decided that we'd fight each other whilst both playing Artorias, whilst both playing different Artoriases. And before I go any further, I'm going to say this for everybody who has commented on that video, because it's one of my most viewed. I am now aware that Artorias is left-handed. At the time, I was not. That is why he is holding the weapon in the wrong hand, as well as the fact that it's Dark Souls 1. Using it left-handed would not have ended well for me. I mean, I got my rear end kicked all over the place by Happy anyway, so... But yes, with this video and many other PvP videos I've done since, the main bit that I did most of the editing on is the introduction, whilst the rest is essentially the raw fights cut up and cut down to be the more interesting parts and leave out a lot of the filler in between and the summons and all of the gestures that were traded. But yes, the thing I enjoyed about this was because this was, I think, the second major PvP character that I went to actually make and had to run through the game to create, and it was just fun to go through it, gathering all the items and essentially making these 2 mini movies to go over the development of Artorias as I understood it at the time, with a little bit of creative liberty for what could be done in the game, to create this introduction. And the editing on the introduction is significantly better than that of the actual content, and that is why it is here as opposed to later up on the list. Number 6. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video is very much in the same boat as the Artorias of the Abyss one, where I have a very, very good opening, which I really enjoyed making, as opposed to the thrown together clips at the end, which was mostly done just for time's sake. Although the main reason why this one is above Artorias of the Abyss is because the introduction uses a lot more effects in a much more stylized way to fit into beat with the music, as opposed to telling a story as such, and also the fact that some of the clips within the fights are actually edited together a bit more fluently, because as opposed to that one, I had footage from both myself, Manpants, and Suicide Frog, which I then grafted together to give multiple perspectives of the fight. So I had things like when someone got backstabbed, they would switch to the camera of that player, and it was just those little things there, those small details, and the introductory frames of all of the characters, which generally made the experience a little bit more enjoyable than making the Artorias of the Abyss one, and that is why it's one position higher. Number 5. I had completely forgotten about my Dino DDay video until I made this list, or went to make this list, because I was originally going to have this as my Orion video, but it was then when going back through it that I found my Dino DDay video, and they were really similar. However, when I actually saw the video again, I remembered that Dino DDay is the one I enjoyed making more for, I think, 3 major reasons. The first reason was Dino DDay is the more entertaining game than Orion Dino Horde, or Orion Prelude as it's now called. And the second reason was because of how I gathered the clips and edited them together. Because the game was actually genuinely enjoyable, I was able to get clips that were enjoyable to look at, mix it together, get a lot of variety in it. Orion Dino Horde was essentially a glitch and problem compilation with a few funny moments that occurred from playing with Kev. And the third reason was the use of, well, it was the first use of text as opposed to doing the same thing again for a different video of the similar sort of style, even though I'd forgotten about doing it in the first place. And I think it's for those reasons why I put it in the place of Orion Dino Horde. However, they're very similar in style. I'll give it an honourable mention for the same sort of spot. Number 4. Blight of Blighttown was pretty much the first video that I actually sat down and worked on editing for my YouTube channel as a gaming video. Before this, I believe I had a few cut-up clips of playthroughs and a few individual shorts of, I think, killing the Asylum demon with a plank shield, which is what kicked off the Water Plank challenge run. However, this was the first major project in which I went, right, I can finally do something with my new software. I can finally play a game, get footage, and edit together, similar to how I did with AMVs. And Blight of Blighttown was where I started with this. And at the time I was using a laptop which was breaking down using Roxio Video Wave, which is the free stuff that came with the Roxio capture card, and it's not good. Let's leave it at that. So it ended up taking ages to actually make because of the number of times it crashed. Essentially, I had to save after every single action, which took about 2 minutes to actually decide that it had done it, to be able to get this together. But in the end, I finally managed to bring it all together and finish it. Although the ending was done on my laptop using what was it, Sony Vegas, because I did have it. It's just that my laptop couldn't handle rendering proper videos in Vegas. So what I had to do was just use still images, which I could do with the last bit because the last bit was the build. And this video is the one which set the standard for my Artorias of the Abyss and for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And this one is, in my opinion, the best of all three of them, because even though it was first, I went the extra step with it. I had the build edited at the end in time to the music with all of the statistics. I had at the beginning an introduction which told the backstory of this character and set up the scene and what was happening, and then the clips in between were sequenced carefully to be able to craft the most fitting of the videos, and it was just so enjoyable to do. I think my one major regret with this is the win-loss statistics, which was, I think, either right at the end or just before the statistics, because it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And I think probably the one other thing I regretted was there were a few clips of Blight of Blighttown that I got which ended up being corrupted, and I didn't get them into the video in the first place. But it was my favourite mass edit PvP video because of all of those reasons, and I think it's where I set my standard for continuing. Number 3. Would you look at that? A Battlefield video. Now, this was a video that was put together when we managed to find I was myself and a few friends found an unranked server, and on the consoles the server browsers weren't working properly. You could only join matches, and if you got into an unranked one you'd only know because you had nothing unlocked. And because I played with Werewolf94, who was incredibly competitive in Battlefield, he would only ever stop playing at the completely serious level for unranked servers. And when we finally found one, in this case, we decided, because when we started I believe it was just the two of us in an empty server, and so we just went rocket launchers only. And we started off like that, and then more people joined in, and then we managed to get an entire squad together, and we decided, hey, you know what? Let's just play with rocket launchers and repair tools only. And that led to this video getting made, because I remembered that I had the Pokemon To Be a Master CD soundtrack on my computer, which happened to have the Team Rocket theme as sung in this video, and having a team of players using rocket launchers was a perfect time to make a video with it. So, and the main reason why this is so high on the list, in fact overtaking the majority of all of those Dark Souls videos, was because it was fun to work with the Pokemon soundtrack and to get rockets to time with the actual music, and all of that together. It was incredibly more fun than anything I'd ever done in Battlefield before. So it managed to make the list, and it managed to make it at number 3. Number 2. Death, God of the Underworld, I think is probably the video that I spent the longest time editing in Vegas. And I think it shows from it. Unlike the other 3 videos I showed where it was mostly PvP footage from Dark Souls, this doesn't have the long intro video followed by some clips cobbled together in time to music, or just cobbled together in most of the cases. This one actually has a very brief intro and then a few moments within the video where it just cuts back to a sort of introductory style, and then the rest of it is PvP, time to the music as best as I could with what I had. This led to using some techniques which I should really use again, such as just cutting out a few frames to get that timing right, to have the health bar effects at specific key moments, just those little things. Oh yes, using the transitions more carefully to actually have them time up with it as well. And I think what made this video so different from what I've usually done, that led to me making it work like this, was the slower song. It gave me a lot more deliberate times to have the beats and hit on time with the weapon swings, or with the enemy dying, or with rolling and all that sort of stuff. And because of the slower beat, I had to work a bit more carefully to make sure the timings were there, because there wasn't a second beat to have it sound like that was the beat I was aiming for. So I ended up having this video rendered about 20 times before it actually got the final render, and I personally think it shows. Which also reminds me that when I made this video, I was intending to do a video following up with the backstory for Death, this rendition of Death, because obviously it's not a traditional rendition of Death, and I've never actually got around to making that video, so I probably should do that, and I should probably do that soon. In fact, it's probably not going to be my next video, because I've got a few other things which I've got recordings for that I was waiting to get this 500 video special out of the way first before doing. But I will get that done eventually, and if I don't, I'll at the very least write the backstory somewhere, just briefly. So yes, that was Death, God of the Underworld, and that was my number 2 favourite video to work on, and I think personally my best video of gameplay yet. And number 1.
Due to the recent
And number 1 goes to the Dark Souls 2 DLC reveal in-depth super analysis. This was one which I worked on out of the blue, because when for those who don't know, the Dark Souls 2 DLC reveal trailer was first launched, a bunch of people were going around making their their opinions on what the DLC was going to be and what it meant for lore. And this was somewhat amusing, especially considering how quickly some people jumped on it with videos being out within a few hours of the trailers being out. So I decided to work on a little parody version of that, where I'd do an analysis of the trailer and I'd go through all of the different things we saw and then point out the ridiculously mundane and the ridiculously far-fetched to create this sort of example, especially some of the smaller things, like for example the snow, which went back to when the DLC, when Dark Souls 2 was first announced, with the bridge that the Faral Knight was crossing, which was rumoured to have been the painted world of Arianis in real life, because that's where it looked like the same bridge from the painted world. And it was just those sort of things. I wanted to put something together along those lines, and I did, and I quite frankly enjoyed doing it the most because it involved a script as opposed to most of what my stuff is, which is either live or not using my voice at all. It was lore related and it was somewhat meant to be comedy. And yeah, it was the one I enjoyed working on the most.
Which means the family masks will return, and that can only mean one thing: he's back. Fire.
So, that was my top 10 videos, and I hope you enjoyed watching them as much as I enjoyed making them. And with that said, I hope you enjoy watching any future videos that I come around to make, and maybe we'll one day reach 1,000 videos, and I can do this all again. I'll see you all next time.